Matt Barry of the Bruins Benders podcast, joining as he always does on Thursdays. Matt, you see that second McDavid goal last night?
I did.
How do you defend that?
I mean, I don't know. That's pretty special.
Yeah. In the chicken wing, too.
Though the chicken wing was interesting because, I mean, people obviously have said all over the internet that if it was this guy, or if it was that guy, it was a chicken wing, and there was no fine, there was no suspension, there was nothing. So, I mean, it's interesting. You can't help but think, what's the favorite, that there's favoritism and so forth. You can't help but think that. I mean, that's just kind of throw him a fine. I mean, he makes his
right.
Fine. Just make it right.
Yeah, that's nothing. And then you at least cover your ass a little bit.
Yeah, then it doesn't look so bad.
Yeah. Yes. But yeah, I mean, of course you have that thought. If Marchand did that, well.
Oh my goodness. then it's 5 games and it's
the max. By the way, also, I thought you would appreciate this. I'm walking, me and my girlfriend are walking back we were at a pub trivia last night, and I had first off, it's like literally a degree outside in Chicago. We're walking back, and something came up in passing where I was talking about Tyler Seguin, and something about how but the Bruins couldn't hold on to him because he was a good young scorer. And she was like, "Well, what does that mean?" And the whole rest of the walk home of like 15 minutes, I go from Thornton to Kessel to Seguin. Even Dougie Hamilton thrown in there from the defense, and the subtleties of each one, and the smear campaigns of each one, and it was quite an anthology, man. It was. I was like,
that's quite a lineup right there.
It truly is, man. That's why I'm worried about. Like, I want them to tank so bad, and I want them to get that generational guy, but it's like, okay, what does that look like 4 years from then? Like after that, what does it then become? And I think that's got to be worried,
Their generational guys or their high picks have all not been long for that organization, and for different reasons, but it's just kind of strange.
And each time they've had something that they've had enough success afterwards where they've been able to say, well, that was the right move. And like, I get it. The Thornton thing, it does allow them a lot of wiggle room that next year, and they get Chara and we're off to the races.
Right.
But like Seguin, like you got nothing in return for him really. And 2 years later, you were out of the playoff picture. And you were lucky to have the core that you still had. With Krejci and Bergeron and Chara and all these guys, but you add Seguin to that, and it's a different deal. But anyway,
it is. And then you're trading Hamilton, you're trading Lucic, that whole thing. Sweeney gets the job, so if you keep Seguin, maybe it's a little different.
Maybe this was the start of the nightmare we're going through right now in a weird way.
I mean, it's slowly but
better
in between. Death.
It got better in between, but anyway, so that's where. I think subconsciously I've been so in on the definitely not going to happen Elias Pettersson trade where I'm like, man, I don't like, I know you don't have any prospect pool right now, and this would be further mortgaging your future, but you have a top 5 center in the league here, two-way guy entering into his prime. I have totally bought in on this. Like I'm gonna be hurt, which is stupid. I feel like a moron. So let me ask you this. Is there any package that the Bruins could show Vancouver right now that isn't going to get them laughed off the phone?
Well, it would have to involve either McAvoy or, I would think it would have to involve at least like a McAvoy, I would think.
That seems like the most likely of the
I don't know if like Patra, Lowry, a pick, Lysell, like that whole package is enough. I just don't think their prospects and their young players are valued enough around the league. I just don't think it's possible. So, and you can't throw me Frederick, Coyle, all that. No one wants that.
Damn.
That can't happen either. So that's like the old, send Jeremy Giambi, Troy O'Leary, and all these guys for Johnson thing. Like it's.
I think I heard that on EEI.
Quality over quantity. Yeah, it just doesn't work that way.
Oh man!
So it's not going to happen. Like, see, here are the important words that Cam Neely used yesterday when he talked about where they are as a team. He said, "Well, we're going to take a look at it," because he was asked about Patra and Lysell potentially being add-ons, and he said, "Well, you have to outscore your mistakes." That was the first thing I had a problem with. And the second thing was, well, we're going to have to decide if we have to add or retool. at the deadline. And retool is not rebuild.
Correct.
So
You see,
retool is like trade Frederick and trade Geeky, and
yep.
that's retool. Rebuild is something totally different. Getting a top line center or really making a blockbuster. It's just not going to happen. So, we could talk about it all we want, but it's going to be at the very most Trent Frederick gets traded, or
Yeah.
Geeky, or both, or whatever.
This is where it's so frustrating to be a fan, because like obviously we don't want them to lose, but and we've talked about this a couple of times on here, right? Like that feels like what it's going to take to get things right, because we've seen retool. Like retool is letting DeBrusk walk and getting Lindholm and Zadorov.
Sure,
that's a retool.
That's a retool.
And you got worse.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. And
retool. Right.
I went over this the other day in terms of those guys you could send in like the franchise guys, so to speak, you could send in a trade to Vancouver. And it was like McAvoy, probably the most likely, but he's got a no move. And I don't, he's from Long Island, played his college hockey in Boston and played for the Bruins. I don't know that he just wants to go out to Vancouver. Playing with Quinn Hughes would be awesome, but I don't know that. And then, well, what about Swayman? Well, I wouldn't mind it for a guy like Pettersson, but does Don Sweeney handle that kind of embarrassment of trading both his goalies in less than a year? Probably not. David Pastrnak. Well, then what's the point of bringing in Pettersson if he's not providing for anybody? Brad Marchand. I don't see a world where Brad Marchand's playing for the Canucks, but then again, Messier did play for the Canucks, I guess. But I don't see that. JT Miller. I know, again, we're stretching here for what the Bruins actually usually do, but it feels like being 32 years old, Miller, rather than a 26-year-old Pettersson, and a smaller AAV and cap hit, $8 million versus 11.6. It feels like that, and Miller being the more toxic of the two. Miller is the common denominator of these toxic issues here, which should be a red flag. But at this point, I see a 100-point center and a guy who is on pace to have more points on anyone on the team other than Pastrnak, and wins faceoffs better than anyone on the team right now. Is there at least a package the Bruins can put together for a Miller, whether they do or not?
They could. I mean, I could see Patra, Lowry, starting with Patra, Lowry. I could see.
Keep sending that Patra tape of that assist the other night.
Send
that in a loop.
Yes. And I would do Patra for a guy like Miller, or a guy like Pettersson, or I would do that. But again, well, that's also the Rangers in conference. I don't know if that would work. It might, but I just look, Don Sweeney in the past here has tried to win trades. Like he's won trades going away. Mm-hmm. And he doesn't take that risky hockey trade very much. Like he did that Jimmy Hayes, Riley Smith thing. And I think it scarred him for life. Like that's the only thing remotely close to a hockey trade that I've seen here in a while, where there could be a 50-50. Like you could lose this trade. And I don't think he really puts himself out there, meaning Sweeney, to do that. So again, I think this is going to be, I honestly, at the end of the day, it's going to be we're going to get a veteran guy, and we're going to get a right shot defensive depth. And that's kind of it.
Because you almost never lose trades, draft picks in the 20s for a guy that's actually going to play on your team.
Sure.
Almost never going to lose that, which is what Sweeney has been great at, right? Mm-hmm. That's been the thing he's been great at.
Right. That's why Ottawa did the Allmark thing, because that's a 20 pick at 25 or whatever, and a fourth liner and a backup goaltender for Allmark, and he changes the landscape of the team. Like that's why you do those trades.
But Letourneau, he's lighting it up on the heights, so I've heard.
Yeah,
I don't want to keep. I mean, apparently, I don't want to keep dragging the kid, but because we knew he was a project, but it is kind of the sign of a bad sign for Don Sweeney.
Yeah, right, I mean, he should have gone OHL, and he would be doing much better in the OHL.
Yes,
and people would actually think he was in much better shape right now if he had good numbers in the OHL. Stepping into Hockey East with top picks all over the place and high-end talent. I mean, Hockey East is different than it was 20 years ago. It's like it's a ton of the best prospects in the country in Hockey East, like up and down the roster, up and down the schedule. Plus, on your own team, it's hard to get ice time.
Yeah.
So that was a bad. I don't know if it was a bad, but it was. I think in hindsight, he probably should have gone OHL for a year, then joined them next year when Hagens and Jelvik maybe and Gasso and all of these Leonard and all these guys leave. Then he could step in and get a better role and a bigger role and be a year stronger and have a good OHL season under his belt. He probably should have done that. I'm not going to give up on the kid because I think that he has some tools, obviously. And I'm going to wait till next year. And if next year he has a really tough year, then you have to start thinking that that's not going to happen.
And if it doesn't pan out, that's going to be like a real microcosm of the Don Sweeney thing, because
Yeah,
it's kind of what you've been talking about for so long. They chase the position so hard,
they
and
do.
they chase the position for a project in the draft. Like that's
Yes.
where you're like, dude, just pick the best friggin' player.
Just pick the
Especially
best prospect.
if you know he's not going to be available for 4 years for your NHL
Right.
team. Like,
100%
why are
true.
you chasing that? Who knows what you have at center in 4 years? Anyway, that's
Right.
I'll
Yeah,
just blow up.
I'm with you. I'm with you.
Another thing you guys have been talking about on the pod a lot, which is something I've noticed in watching this team recently, is we bashed them a little bit for their free agent signings earlier in the season. You know, Swayman very slow to get going. Hopefully, this is him getting going here. Lindholm still on a 40-point pace, which is horrid. But Nikita Zadorov, he's giving you something.
He is.
Plus,
I mean,
plus defenseman on this team.
Yeah, he's
Yeah.
one of the only plus players. He's starting to show himself, physically stepping up for teammates. He's not playing as poorly as he was. He had a good postseason last year, and I hopefully we're seeing Zadorov just kind of getting acclimated and playing better now. And he stepped up when Lindholm and now McAvoy are out. And Lowry hasn't played well. So Peak and Zadorov, honestly, have been the two best defensemen.
Absolutely.
And have kept the ship afloat, to be honest. And Peak has been really good. Peak has been under the radar all season long. Like, he's just a steady guy. And he was a great pickup by Sweeney, who, people don't give him credit for it because it was kind of minor thing or whatever. But boy, he's really valuable now. I just wrote something on InsideTheRink.com today about Peak, about being like much more valuable asset than you ever thought he would be for them. So
yeah, I think that's a good point. Like, it was kind of under the radar, but honestly, it's probably one of the best moves he's made in terms of how cheap it was. And we've seen what it's like for the Bruins when you don't, because sometimes he's a sixth defenseman. Obviously, right now he's not, but sometimes he's a sixth defenseman, and you see how bad that can be when that's not good, right? What if it's Greg Zanin or Wade Redden, or even some of the young guys, Bartkowski, Colin Miller, even who's a speed
Connor
guy,
Clifton,
but
Cliffy hockey.
Cliffy, that's a good one. And you see how much it can take you down. And when they're fully healthy, Peak probably is your fifth, sixth guy. Right. And he helps you out a ton, the way, McQuaid did on the third pairing for a couple of years there. That is a good, I think he's been so solid and has one goal with the Bruins from 200 feet. So it's pretty solid, man.
Yeah.
Speaking of that back end, we talked about, Swayman. This is the hot thing this week. Swayman's back and he's stealing something for you. And that goals above expected is going to get better. The eye test has certainly been there, I think. Is this just a good week for Swayman, or is this like, okay, finally, this is the Swayman we saw last year that was an all-star that looked like he was going to be the starter?
Well, look, you missed camp, and we kind of thought during camp that if he's missing it, then he's going to have to take some time. So this was, in hindsight, it's kind of expected that it's going to be a little bit. Now,
but he was practicing with BU.
Right.
I mean, come on. How are you not ready for the NHL?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that was great. That was good. That was great.
Practicing with Pandolfo.
But I'll tell you, though, that he tracking pucks, anticipation, just lateral movement, just to playing the position, like standing up big in net. Those little subtle things are much better now. And I think Smitty on the podcast actually made a good point. Seeing a lot of rubber lately, so can't help but be focused. Can't help but be sharp. You know what I mean? Like, so much pucks coming at him at all different angles that you got to be on alert. And I think that's helped him get back into his rhythm. That's not a recipe for success, but I mean, I think with the amount of shots they're allowing, it's actually kind of worked him into a better rhythm. as a
Mhm.
goaltender. And right now, I think you're seeing what you're probably going to see for the most part because he's this. I mean, this is what he's capable of. We've seen this before. And I think that the confidence is back. I think that he's back into a rhythm. I think he's sort of shaken off a lot of the rust. He also was in a little bit of a divot there where the team wasn't playing well and he was at the front and center. It was a lot of pressure. So I
Mhm.
think now, I think he's settled in. I think he'll play play 3 out of 4 games the rest of the way, and it's good for them. It gives them a real chance. If he's not going right, then they have no chance of making the playoffs. I don't believe. I just don't think
Right.
so. But if he does, then they have every chance in the world, and they probably will make the playoffs if he keeps playing even remotely like this.
Because it is starting to look like the postseason last year, where
Yeah.
he's seeing a lot of rubber. He's getting
Uh-huh.
that little edge to him.
Yeah.
He wants to
Yep.
fight guys, which
Yeah.
he did also do in the early part of the season. It was like, hey, how about you worry about stopping the puck?
Yeah.
But
Right.
it's kind of taking on that feel. The Bruins
It
aren't putting
is.
together a ton of pressure, and they're allowing a
It
lot of
is.
shots.
It is. It is. And right now, the defense with McAvoy and Lindholm was back at practice. You get those two guys back around Four Nations or around there or slightly before. That's great. You get your defensive core back in shape, and I think you find out what your lineup is. Stick with it, and we'll see what happens. I mean, we said that this was kind of a gauntlet of the schedule, and to beat Florida, to finally beat them, even if you were outplayed and so forth, you found a way to beat them. Get that monkey off your back a little. Then you beat Tampa Bay. If you go in and beat Ottawa Saturday, then you've beaten division rivals, and you're putting yourself in a position where you kind of hold your own destiny if you keep it going, and get into the playoffs and see what happens. I mean, they'll be an unassuming team when they get there, unless there's some ridiculous move that makes them 100%
2019
better.
Blues run or something.
Yeah, but we've seen it before with the Blues, and we've seen
Although
it
they were
before
undefeated.
where Capitals last year, like I thought they were terrible, and then they make this really, they really play pretty well, and then they make this kind of, they get into the playoffs. I had no idea they get in the playoffs, but now they're playing great this year and one of
Yep.
the top teams in the league. So, you can turn it around pretty quickly. The problem is that they just don't have any young players or prospects, and they have to use the free agent wire and trades to stay where they are. Like they have to. And now you're counting on guys wanting to come play for you.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yep.
whether instead of going and picking them and developing them and giving them no chance, like now you have to outbid other teams. And it's a tough place to be in. It
And
is.
it's in a tough era to do it. I mean,
Yes.
how often
Yeah.
do we hear about this? People they want to play in the no income tax states. They want to
Yeah,
play in
the
Nevada
income
and
tax is a
Florida.
big thing now.
Yep.
Huge thing. It's what's killing like the Canadian teams. It's what's killing the Toronto Blue Jays off the planet. Like
Yeah, true.
this is.
Yeah.
I mean, these things matter. These things matter. So,
I think that's a very
but
fascinating thing. Yeah. It's a topic for
yeah,
another day, I guess. But the NHL has
yeah,
gotta find some ground there.
they do.
Because it's not
They
great.
do.
It's
They
it's gonna
do. And
kill
I'm
the
really
markets they
interested to
love.
see what I'm interested to see what the salary cap looks like. People are telling me how it's going to just grow exponentially, and history has shown that 3 to 4 million a year. And then I don't trust Gary Bettman to make any type of we're gonna raise it 15, 18 million. I just don't see it happening. I think it's going to be a gradual increase. And the Bruins always tend to put themselves right up against the cap, regardless of how much space they have. They always
Yep.
tend to get them there where they're playing gymnastics all the time. So I don't trust that either. But here's what I found out when Neely talked yesterday. No one's going anywhere.
Yep.
Nobody's going anywhere. Charlie Jacobs said that he had utmost confidence in them, and nobody is going anywhere. So this is your group to retool or add or whatever. This is the management group that's going to do it. So we'll see what happens.
And then Charlie said, we're not just trying to make the playoffs. We're trying to win the Stanley Cup.
Yeah.
And,
Okay.
and I laughed out loud.
Okay.
This team.
Yeah.
Anyway, we got some great hockey to build up to Saturday, by the way.
Yeah.
I mean, Edmonton, Colorado tonight is going to be a great one. McKinnon versus McDavid. Can't wait for that. And then Saturday, that's 3:00 Eastern, if I'm not mistaken.
3:00 Eastern. Yeah.
Ottawa, huge game, 4-point game, another divisional one.
Mhm.
You've taken 4 points from the last two. But obviously that Florida one went into overtime. That is a massive game. Bruins Benders podcast will be live post game after that one. And you've got an episode that dropped today. Plug it away.
Yeah. Today was, we talked about Marchand and Pasternak and what we thought of that whole situation, Charlie McAvoy injury and the defensive and how the defense has added some offense. So we talked about that in the pod. That dropped today, all platforms, including YouTube. And then we'll be back at it in the post game. We've done every post game this year. We're trying like hell to get there, and
chugging, man.
We're over halfway point. Like we're going to do every single post game right through the playoffs.
It's impressive. It is impressive, and there's a community there every night. Some are commenting in the first period, waiting for you guys to address it 3 hours later.
We're changing that fan comment section to the sin bin. I think we're going to make that change.
I like that.
It's going to get sin bin because there's a lot of sinners in there.
Yes, for sure. The Camp Show will be in there. Can't wait to catch it on Saturday afternoon because that is a big game. Bruins Senators. We will talk to Matt Barry of the Bruins Benders podcast next Thursday. Matt, appreciate you coming on once again.
Anytime, buddy. Thanks, Cam.
We are Rogue Media Sports.
Hey, thanks for stopping by. And if you like this video, be sure to give us a like and subscribe. It really helps out the channel a ton. You can follow me on Twitter here for some more outrageous Boston sports takes coming to you every weekday at noon Eastern time. And then after that, wherever you get your podcasts.
We are Rogue Media Sports.